Richie Furay, welcome to eTown. It's great to hear you sing and play, man.
Thank you so very much, Nick.
I never told you this, but once when I was a teenager, my parents went out and I was home alone. And we lived in the country. And I was listening to this radio station in New York called WNEW. And they were starting to play albums in their entirety. And so that night, I thought, I've never had beer before. And so, in the privacy of our home, I drank quite a few beers. And the record that came on that completely blew my mind, and it actually got better and better as the night went on, was the first Poco record.
Wow.
And that was my introduction to Poco. It was a landmark moment. I'm sure you've heard weirder stories, but that's just mine.
Well, I'm glad you made it, man.
Yeah, I made it. It worked out okay. I loved reading your book, picking up the pieces too, and learning all kinds of stuff about your family, the family drugstore, and the gift shop, and losing your dad too young in Yellow Springs.
45.
Yeah, and music, and an amazing musical journey. It's funny that the early days of the folk scene, as evidenced by some of the pictures in the book, was pretty square.
It was real square. Actually, when we got to New York, it was pretty much over. Yeah. It was moving on towards the more Electric Love and Spoonful and that. I mean, we were there on the tail end of it for sure.
Yeah. But you would come at it more sort of like Kingston Trio, singing in a choir. You even auditioned for the gig that John Denver eventually got, playing with the Chad Mitchell Trio.
There you go. So here it goes, man.
Yeah, but I
ended up at Pratt & Whitney Aircraft handing out tools in a tool crib.
There's dignity in all work, Richie, as you know.
There is, man.
Yeah. But it's amazing. There's Steve Stills, with a sweater and a tie on, playing a 12-string, and it's pretty wild.
I look at some of those pictures, man. It's like, really?
It was really interesting to just read about the drive and the curiosity that you all had in looking to find each other and find a way to make music and be a part of this thing.
Yeah.
And you had met, obviously you'd met Stephen Stills. You met Neil Young in New York briefly.
Yeah, briefly. Yeah. He had, when this group that we were in called the A-Go-Go Singers.
Right.
Group of 9. There was a lot of groups, the New Christie Minstrel Serendipity Singers, Back Porch Majority, and we were the house band at the Cafe A-Go-Go, which was across the street from the Bitter End in New York, and so we were called the A-Go-Go Singers, and Stephen and I were in that band. When that band broke up, Stephen took a little piece of it and went on across Canada, worked across Canada, and that's where he met Neil. And he told him to come down. We were still maintaining an apartment on Thompson Street. Yeah. And so Neil came down and stayed with me for a couple of days. Actually taught me nowadays Clancy Can't Even Sing, and I have it on tape somewhere. I don't know where. Can you believe that? I can't find it. But anyway, so we had all met at various times, and Neil was actually on his way. He brought Bruce Palmer out to Los Angeles looking for Stephen. And Stephen and I were Stephen had asked me at this time to come out, and be a part of his band. And he said, man, all I need is another singer. And so I said, yeah, Pratt & Whitney doesn't sound real good about this time.
Because you left New York, you're back working a factory job in Ohio.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, the real motivation for me was Graham Parsons brought the Byrds' first record up to me when I was working in Massachusetts or in Connecticut, and when I heard Mr. Tambourine Man, and from there, it was like, oh my goodness, I got to get to making music. So that's when I got in touch with Steve. He said, come on out to L.A., and I got a band. And
turns out he didn't really have a band.
He didn't, did he? It was just me and him.
Yeah.
It made it tough because I'd already turned him down once. To go back to Pratt & Whitney, the band sounded so bad. Right. So to go clear across the country, I was really stepping out in faith there.
Yeah. But of course, it also led to one of the most remarkable stories in serendipitous rock and roll history.
Yep.
Which is you and Stephen driving around Sunset Boulevard.
We were heading east on Sunset.
Yeah. And you had been kind of looking for Neil Young. You'd actually sent his dad a letter, right?
Well, the letter that I sent was actually to Stephen's dad.
Oh, to Stephen's dad.
That's how I got to. So
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if we had heard that Neil had come down there or not, but when we were driving, he was actually leaving town. He was on his way to the 405 going west on Sunset Boulevard. We were coming back from somewhere, who knows where, I don't know where. But we kind of were passing on Sunset Strip, and it was like, I mean, when you see a 53 hearse, you know.
Which was Neil's car?
This was Neil's car.
Yeah,
I mean, you knew
hearse.
that there was something going on there, and it had Ontario license plates, and there was a traffic jam. That's true story. I mean, had a traffic jam. We pulled into Ben Frank's parking lot, which was a restaurant right where we met, and that was the beginning of Buffalo Springfield.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And things happened fast in those days in Los Angeles. What was it, 6 weeks after that you guys had a record contract, or they were fighting after you?
There were a few companies that were looking at us, and we were actually managed by a couple of guys that worked with Sonny and Cher, and so they're the ones that introduced us to Ahmet Ertegun, who was the president of Atlantic Records, and that's
Atco, and you got a gig at the Whiskey. It's interesting hearing Los Lobos talk about playing the Whiskey, you know, opening for the Blasters because they were doing their residency there, and it's just, you know.
We were the house band for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, we worked with the Doors, we worked with Love, we worked with Lee, the Grassroots, and Lee. There was a lot of different bands, and when we started, Nick, nobody had a clue as to who we were, and by the time we finished, they were lined up around the block to take a listen.
That's
It was pretty cool.
And one of the faces in that crowd at the Whiskey turned out to be an important person in your life.
Yeah, certainly.
How long have you been married now?
We're in the year 49 now.
49. In case you just tuned in, you're listening to eTown. Nick Forster, and I'm here with Richie Furay. So I was talking with Los Lobos, talking about traditional music that kind of informed some of the stuff that they did. And you were also, you know, mixing some traditions. The drummer for Buffalo Springfield had just come off a stint playing with the Dillards, bluegrass band that had been on Andy Griffith's show and had some success, Doug and Rodney Dillard. And so bluegrass and country music, you'd crossed paths with Graham Parsons. You were inspired by the Byrds. Were there country artists that you really connected with? Were you a Buck Owens guy, or were you a Hank Williams guy, or what country music?
Well, I
spoke
definitely
to you?
listened to Hank Williams because my dad did like country music, and Hank Williams was one that I remember him listening to a lot. But you know, country music wasn't really something that I focused on. It was just, I mean, it just happened. Graham Parsons actually turned me on to George Jones, which I'd never heard a voice like that in my life. I was like, oh my goodness, this guy can sing. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And so, and of course, then that led into, you know, the country rock. Starting the country rock bands. Graham started the Burrito Brothers it was at the same time that we started Poco. We actually tried to we talked to each other about putting one band together, but then it was, well, who am I going to give up for who am I going to give, you know, so we just decided two bands were better than one.
It's like baseball teams trading, you know, it's like, it's really, it's kind of remarkable. I think there was a Poco reunion, and, you know, some tension between your rock and roll career and your role as a pastor. And you resolved that adequately? Is that all working out?
Well, now it seems to be working out just fine.
Yeah.
Early on, there was certainly some folks that didn't think that their pastor should be, you know, playing out rock and roll music. But I've really found it's a great time to go out. I mean, I'm not out there to proselytize and shake my finger at somebody and say, you know, get right or get left, you know. But I do tell my story. And my story certainly focuses on Jesus Christ, you know. I mean, he is certainly the Lord of my life and has given me the gift to be able to keep and continue to play music today. And so he gets thanked.
Yeah.
You know, we thank him.
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to also mention that that you got to be part of another kind of a congregation, which was headlining Bonnaroo in 2012 for the Buffalo Springfield reunion. That must have been quite an experience.
It was really cool. Actually getting together and doing the 9 shows that we did, we were supposed to do 30 more, but it ended at Bonnaroo. And, I have no idea how. I mean, I think there were 90,000 people but they have like 3 or 4 different stages. But I mean, it was people as far as you could see. And what amazed me was here we were, a group, that recorded in 1965, 1966, and there were kids, young kids. I mean, this is a place for kids. When they go camp, they're singing our songs. They're mouthing the lyrics. They're just, they're singing them. And so it's
pretty wild to think about Monterey Pop Festival all the way to Bonnaroo.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good bookend for a career. It's amazing. Well, Richie, there's so much going on in your life, and I know we could talk more. We have a lot of music to get to. Again, I just want to thank you for stopping by. Congratulations on a varied, interesting career this far, and I know you're still at it.
Still at it, still trying to make new music, as well as the old.
Great hearing you sing with your daughter, too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Jesse's here with us. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks.
Well, welcome back, Richie Furay.
Thanks, man.
Hi, this is Nick Forster from eTown. If you want to stay up to date with all the performances, interviews, and behind-the-scenes footage, click the subscribe button. Thanks.